In the world of exotic reptiles, few names were as respected as Ben Renick. A world-renowned snake breeder, Ben had built an empire from his passion, breeding and selling some of the rarest and most valuable pythons in existence. His state-of-the-art reptile facility housed more than 3,000 snakes, drawing customers from around the world, from collectors to scientists and zoo specialists. But on June 8, 2017, Ben's thriving business became a crime scene. He was found lying face down in a pool of blood, his body surrounded by towering glass enclosures of slithering, coiled serpents. At first, whispers of a freak accident spread. Had one of his own snakes turned on him? Was this a case of a powerful python attacking its owner? Yet the reality was far more chilling. As investigators combed through the facility, they made a shocking discovery. Ben wasn't killed by a snake. He had been shot 8 times. A single bullet casing left behind shattered the illusion of an accident. It was murder. But who would want Ben dead? Meanwhile, a devoted father, a loving husband, a man on the brink of even greater success. Somewhere in the shadows, someone had carefully planned his execution. Was it jealousy? Money? Betrayal? Every true crime story begins with a life full of promise, dreams in motion, futures unfolding. But sometimes those closest to us are the ones who know exactly how to bring it all crashing down. Ben Renick was a man on the rise. More than just a snake breeder, he was a pioneer in the reptile world, a businessman with an empire worth millions. His passion for rare and exotic snakes had made him a household name among collectors, researchers, and zoos. But beyond the industry, Ben was a devoted father, a loyal husband, and a man who believed in building something lasting, not just for himself, but for those he loved. To everyone who knew him, he was a man with everything to live for. Yet, as successful as he was in business, there were things even Ben could not see, shadows moving just beyond his line of sight. There was his wife who had stood beside him as he built his empire. She had dreams of her own, working to create a business in an entirely different field. To many, she was supportive, kind, and deeply involved in their life together. But behind closed doors, was everything as perfect as it seemed? Then there was his brother, his closest confidant, the person who had been with him through every major moment in life. The two had grown up side by side, built their futures on the same land, and shared an unbreakable bond. If anyone knew Ben, it was him. But bonds, even the strongest ones, can be tested. And when tragedy struck, suspicions would arise in places no one ever expected. And then, there were the friends, employees, and people who moved within Ben's orbit. Those who knew the inner workings of his business, the secrets of his personal life, and the hidden struggles that even he might not have acknowledged. The people in Ben Renick's world each played a role in his final days. Some stood by him, some turned away, and one of them had something to hide. At first glance, their lives seemed ordinary. A loving family, a thriving business, a bright future. But beneath the surface, something was unraveling, something no one saw coming. Someone had a secret. Someone had a motive. Someone was about to ensure that Ben Renick wouldn't make it out alive. Ben and Lindley Renick seemed to have it all: a successful business, a growing family, and a bright future. From the outside, their marriage looked solid, a partnership built on mutual support and ambition. But beneath the surface, their relationship was crumbling, and the cracks were beginning to show. What started as small lies and hidden struggles soon spiraled into a dangerous game of deception, financial distress, and betrayal. Ben was a man at the peak of his career, a rising star in the reptile breeding world. His business was booming, and in 2017, he was on the verge of a major financial breakthrough, a lucrative deal worth $1.2 million. He had already received an initial payment of $200,000, a sum that could change his family's future. But what he didn't realize was that his own wife had secrets of her own, secrets that would soon lead to his untimely death. Lindley Renick had dreams beyond being just a supportive wife. She had opened a spa, determined to build her own success, but unlike Ben's thriving business, hers was failing. The losses were piling up, the debts were growing, and Lindley, rather than confronting the truth, chose to hide it. She lied to Ben about the finances, covering up her mounting failures. But no lie stays hidden forever. As the financial strain intensified, Ben began to uncover the truth. He realized that Lindley had been lying about money, delaying payments, and deceiving him about the spa's losses. The tension between them escalated. Then, just hours before his murder, Ben sent a message to Lindley, a final warning that would later be seen as hauntingly prophetic. No more lying, no more keeping things from me. For Ben, it was a call for honesty, a demand to fix what was broken. But for Lindley, it was something else entirely, an ultimatum that threatened to expose her deception. And if there was one thing Lindley couldn't afford, it was to lose control. While Ben worked tirelessly to secure their future, Lindley was entangled in a web of lies and betrayals, slipping further away from the life they had built together. With her marriage unraveling, her finances in ruins, and $1 million deal just within reach, Lindley saw only one solution. Ben had to go. Whether it was for money, freedom, or simply to maintain control over the lies she had spun, the decision had been made. But the question remained, would she do it alone? Or was someone else willing to pull the trigger for her? What happened next would leave a world-renowned snake breeder dead in his own facility, his body lying in a pool of blood, while his wife played the role of the devastated widow. But behind the tears and the panic, a carefully orchestrated plan was unfolding, one that would take investigators years to unravel. June 8, 2017, it was a day like any other at Renick Reptiles. Ben Renick, a world-renowned snake breeder, was tending to his prized collection, surrounded by thousands of pythons, anacondas, and exotic reptiles worth millions. But by evening, his thriving business would become a crime scene. At approximately 5:30 p.m., Lindley Renick arrived home. According to her, she went to check on her husband at the snake facility, only to stumble upon a horrific sight. Ben was lying face down on the cold concrete floor, motionless, a pool of blood expanding around him. His body was eerily still, surrounded by towering glass enclosures of slithering snakes. Panic set in. Lindley frantically dialed 911, her voice shaking as she claimed to have found her husband dead. Her initial reaction? A snake attack. In a facility housing over 3,000 exotic reptiles, it seemed like a plausible explanation. Perhaps one of the larger pythons had turned on him. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was just another occupational hazard in the world of reptile breeding. But when first responders arrived, they immediately sensed something was wrong. The scene was chaotic. Snakes hissed and moved within their enclosures as officers cautiously stepped inside. But something was missing. There were no signs of a struggle, no signs of a snake bite, no signs that this was an accident at all. And then they saw it, a shell casing resting just above Ben's head on a nearby shelf. Suddenly, everything changed. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was a murder. As they examined Ben's body, the horrifying truth was revealed. He had been shot 8 times. The gunfire had been precise, methodical. This wasn't random. Someone had come here with the sole intention of killing Ben Renick, and they had made sure he wouldn't survive. Now, investigators faced a chilling question. Who would want Ben dead, and why? In the wake of Ben Renick's shocking murder, law enforcement worked quickly to unravel what had happened inside the snake facility that day. At first, investigators considered the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. After all, Ben's business was worth millions, and his collection of rare and exotic snakes was highly valuable. But a closer look at the facility revealed nothing had been stolen. Not a single snake was missing, nor had any of Ben's high-priced inventory been disturbed. Whoever had killed Ben hadn't come for the reptiles. They had come for him. With no signs of forced entry and no apparent struggle, suspicion quickly shifted to those closest to Ben. His brother Sam Renick became an initial focus. He had a close relationship with Ben, but could there have been underlying tensions? Could a dispute over family, business, or inheritance have driven him to murder? Detectives questioned Sam extensively. They ran a gunshot residue test on his hands, analyzed his alibi, and even put him through a polygraph examination. The results? Sam was cleared. He had been nowhere near the crime scene when Ben was killed, and every piece of forensic evidence supported his innocence. He had lost not only his brother, but also his peace of mind, knowing that someone close to them had committed an unthinkable act. With Sam ruled out, investigators turned their attention elsewhere. One person remained at the center of it all, Lindley Renick, Lindley, who had discovered Ben's body, Lindley, who had called 911 in a panic, Lindley, who now stood as the grieving widow. She too was subjected to a gunshot residue test. It came back negative, but investigators weren't ready to rule her out just yet. As they dug deeper, a more complex and disturbing picture began to emerge. One that had nothing to do with robbery and everything to do with lies, betrayal, and hidden motives. Ben had built a successful business, but his personal life was far from stable. Investigators combed through Lindley's phone records, Facebook messages, and financial transactions, and what they found changed everything. Lindley had been living a double life. She wasn't just a widow mourning her husband. She was a woman with secrets, multiple affairs, including one with Brandon Blackwell, a man she had met online, raised serious questions about her loyalty to Ben. Had her relationships played a role in what happened? Then came the financial records. Ben had recently discovered Lindley had been lying to him about money. Her spa business was failing. She was hiding debts. She was delaying payments. And just hours before his murder, Ben had sent her a message that read, "No more lying, no more keeping things from me." The deeper investigators dug, the darker the story became. The woman who once seemed like a devoted wife and mother was now appearing in a very different light. A woman in financial distress, a woman caught in deception, a woman with a possible motive. And soon they would learn she wasn't working alone. What at first seemed like a tragic loss was now looking more like a meticulously planned crime. But the most shocking revelations were yet to come. Because while Lindley Renick had secrets, she wasn't the only one keeping them. And when the truth finally surfaced, it would be far more sinister than anyone. 4 months after Ben's murder, Lindley agreed to take a polygraph test, a critical moment in the investigation. She failed, miserably. The results sent a wave of suspicion through the case, but suspicion alone wasn't enough to make an arrest. With no physical evidence linking Lindley to the crime, no witnesses, and no weapon, law enforcement had nothing to hold her on. And so the case went cold. For nearly 3 years, Ben's family, his friends, and the reptile community were left in limbo. They pushed for answers. They pleaded for justice, but there were none. The man who had built a multi-million-dollar empire from his passion for reptiles had been brutally executed, and his killer had seemingly gotten away with it. Until finally a breakthrough. January 2020, an unexpected name surfaced. Brandon Blackwell. Brandon had once been one of Lindley's lovers, a man she had met online while still married to Ben. At first, he had seemed unimportant to the investigation, a fleeting relationship from Lindley's complicated personal life. But now he was talking, and what he had to say changed everything. Blackwell had been sitting in jail on charges of stalking and violating a restraining order filed by Lindley herself. He had nothing to lose and, apparently, a lot to reveal. And what he revealed was a murder plot far more twisted than anyone had imagined. According to Blackwell, Ben's death wasn't supposed to happen that way, because Lindley's first plan hadn't been with a gun, it had been with poison. Blackwell described how Lindley had first tried to kill Ben by lacing his protein shake with a lethal dose of narcotics. She had crushed up a massive amount of prescription pills, dissolving them into the drink, expecting Ben to pass out and never wake up. But somehow he survived. Maybe the dosage wasn't high enough. Maybe Ben had sensed something was off. Whatever the reason, the poison failed. And now Lindley had a problem. She needed a new plan, a plan that would not fail. With poisoning off the table, Lindley turned to an old connection, Michael Humphrey, her ex-boyfriend. Humphrey had a criminal past, and Lindley knew he was someone who could help her get the job done. On June 8, 2017, the plan was set in motion. Lindley and Michael drove to Renick Reptiles. Michael had the gun. The intention was clear. Ben was not leaving the facility alive. But when they arrived, things didn't go exactly as planned. Blackwell's confession revealed something chilling. Michael Humphrey backed out at the last moment. He handed the gun to Lindley and told her, "This is something you have to do yourself." And she did. She stepped inside the Snake facility. She raised the gun. She fired 8 rounds into the man she had once promised to love. Ben Renick never stood a chance. And with that, the case was no longer a mystery. The truth was finally out, and police were ready to make their move. For nearly 3 years, Ben's killer had walked free. But now the evidence was undeniable. a failed poisoning attempt, a premeditated murder plot, a shooter who was no longer a mystery. On January 16, 2020, Ben Renick and Michael Humphrey were arrested, charged with first-degree murder. The woman who had once stood as a grieving widow was now exposed as something else entirely. But her fight wasn't over yet, because now she had to convince a jury that she wasn't the mastermind behind her husband's murder. For years, Lindley had surrounded herself with people she could manipulate, people who had helped her keep her secrets. One of those people was Ashley Shaw, a close friend and employee at her failing spa. Ashley had been involved from the beginning. She had helped Lindley in the weeks leading up to the murder, had listened to the planning, and had even played a role after Ben was dead. But when the pressure mounted and police closed in, Ashley made a choice. She flipped. In exchange for immunity, she told police everything. Her testimony exposed the full extent of Lindley's deadly plan. Lindley had asked Ashley to get prescription pills she intended to use to poison Ben before the shooting ever took place. She had confessed to Ashley that she had pulled the trigger herself after Michael Humphrey backed out at the last moment. After the murder, Lindley returned to the spa, where Ashley helped her wash away the evidence, scrubbing her body clean of the remnants of the crime. With Ashley Shaw's confession, the prosecution now had an airtight case, one that would soon bring Ben Renick to trial. Michael Humphrey, the man who had driven Lindley to the murder scene and put a gun in her hands, was the first to face trial. While he hadn't pulled the trigger, prosecutors argued that he had been a willing accomplice, a key figure in the planning and execution of Ben's murder. A jury agreed. Michael Humphrey was convicted of first-degree murder. Facing a life sentence, Humphrey saw one final opportunity to help himself: cooperation. And so, he turned against Lindley, revealing the final missing piece. With his help, investigators located the gun used to kill Ben, hidden away for nearly 3 years, the ultimate piece of physical evidence that tied Lindley directly to the crime. Now, with a witness confession, a murder weapon, and a clear motive, Lindley was out of options. In December 21, Ben Renick's trial began. Her defense strategy? Blame Michael Humphrey. She claimed innocence, insisting she had been present at the crime scene but had nothing to do with the murder. She portrayed herself as a victim, saying Humphrey was the real killer and that she had been too afraid to stop him. But prosecutors dismantled her web of lies one by one. The failed poisoning attempt, proof that this was a premeditated crime, not a spur-of-the-moment act. Ashley Shaw's testimony, first-hand accounts of Lindley's confessions and planning. Michael Humphrey's cooperation, his admission that Lindley was the one who fired the fatal shots. The recovered murder weapon, physical evidence that Lindley could no longer deny. In the end, the jury didn't buy her story. After 12 hours of deliberation, they reached a verdict. Ben Renick was found guilty of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. But what came next left many outraged. Her sentence? 13 years in prison for murder, 3 additional years for armed criminal action, a total of 16 years behind bars. For many, including Ben's family and friends, the sentence was far too lenient. Ben's brother, Sam Renick, had spent years waiting for justice. But now, standing in the courtroom, he struggled to accept what he was hearing. 16 years, that's all. For the cold-blooded execution of his brother, the woman responsible would walk free before her 50s. For Sam, it felt like a slap in the face. The judge himself acknowledged the light sentence, telling Lindley,
"You're awful lucky, ma'am. You're gonna get out in your 40s, and my 40s weren't too bad. I just hope you don't kill again. That's it."
For Ben's loved ones, there was no real justice, no sentence that could ever bring back the man they had lost. A man who had dedicated his life to breeding some of the most misunderstood creatures on Earth, only to be betrayed by the one person he trusted the most. For the reptile community, Ben Renick's death was more than just a headline. It was a devastating loss. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a pioneer, a visionary breeder, a man whose passion for reptiles had changed the industry. To honor him, a rare mutation of a snake was named after him, the Renick ghost, a fitting tribute to a man who dedicated his life to creatures often misunderstood, only to be betrayed by the one person he never saw coming. For Sam Renick, the pain of losing his brother never truly fades. He had shared a life with Ben, had worked alongside him, had built a future together, and in one moment, all of it was taken away. But Sam refused to let his brother's memory disappear. He vowed to raise Ben's children, to protect them from the horrors of their mother's betrayal, and to ensure that his brother's legacy lived on. For Sam, justice may have been served in the courtroom, but no prison sentence, whether 16 years or life, could bring back what was lost. Ben Renick dedicated his life to handling some of the deadliest creatures on Earth. But in the end, it wasn't a snake that killed him. It wasn't a venomous bite. It wasn't the strength of a constrictor. It wasn't the dangers of his profession. It was the woman he shared his home with. The greatest threats don't always come from the wild. Sometimes they sleep beside you. If you found this case fascinating and want to hear more shocking true crime stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your fellow crime enthusiasts. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We've got more incredible cases coming your way. Do you have a true crime case you want us to cover? A mystery that still haunts you? Drop it in the comments below, and we just might feature it in a future episode. And finally, what do you think? Did Lindley Rennick get what she deserved? Or did the justice system go too easy on her? Let us know your thoughts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on True Crime Revealed. Stay safe. And remember, the most dangerous predators aren't always the ones in the wild.